Hey there, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Show Me the Crypto. This week, we chat with Elena Nadolinski, the founder and CEO of Ironfish. And this episode's all about privacy, why privacy is important on the blockchain. Ulf, what did you think of this episode?
I love that being able to talk with someone in the space who's been building privacy technology on the blockchain for over 4 years now. It was our first opportunity we've had to do that on the show, and to learn about the challenges, of which there are obviously so many, was one part of this chat that was very interesting. But then to get into how Elena and Ironfish are actually working on solutions, how Ironfish currently works, and how Ironfish strives to eventually evolve into the plumbing of the crypto industry in terms of facilitating privacy on any blockchain. It was a great episode. We covered a lot, and I think you're going to love it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting to think about because in everyday life, we don't go around showing people what's in our wallets. We don't have the visibility or tell people that about all of the assets that we have. Yet in crypto, that's sort of the case. And so while privacy may get a bad reputation, the reality is we really do need it if we want this to appeal to the billions that we hope to come into this industry. So as Ulf said, you're going to love this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Elena Nadolinski, founder and CEO at Ironfish. Elena's parents, both software engineers, told her not to become a software engineer. However, reverse psychology came into play as Elena ignored their advice and began her career at Microsoft before joining the startup world and eventually discovering crypto in 2017. Ironfish is a censorship-resistant, privacy-enabled platform for everyday crypto transactions. Elena, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. What a great intro.
We're excited about this conversation. And I want to start off with asking you, so congratulations. We were talking before we hit record. You're a new mother. You just had your second child. And so are you going to implement the same psychology on your kids and tell them not to become software engineers?
I think when you have a kid, you kind of realize you just want them to be happy. So I think it's a little early for that. I just want them to be happy.
And going back to your time at Microsoft, you put in some time there and eventually decided you wanted to enter the startup world. So what was it about creating a startup that was appealing to you?
That's a great question. You know, I'm not sure. I've always wanted to start to start a company, and I'm not entirely sure like what the reason behind it was, but it just felt like always something I had to do or like a goal of mine. But yeah, no, other people have asked me before of like, you know, like what is the drive? Like what drives you? Like why do you feel like you need to do these certain things? And yeah, I mean, the real answer is I'm not entirely sure. It's just something that I've always thought I had to do.
But just in general, even going from, because before you launched your own startup, you worked at startups. And so from going from something like Microsoft, like a big, well-established company, what prompted you to make the change and work at another startup?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the way I even got to Microsoft, which to your point is definitely not a startup. So firstly, I was an intern there. And Microsoft was a great place to be an intern at. They practically paid for my school. And so that was a, very tempting thing to keep coming back to them. And when I was trying to figure out where to go full time, like after college, there was a team within Microsoft that was like the incubation team within Microsoft. And so it was within the Office org, but it really attracted just amazing minds within Microsoft, of like 200-person team where there were a ton of like subcategories or sub teams that were working on things that indirectly benefited Microsoft products. And so effectively it was like an incubator within Microsoft. And so when I interviewed, particularly for that team, I was just really inspired by kind of what they were building in particular, like the energy that they were creating within Microsoft. And so I decided to join that particular team when I went to Microsoft. I learned the hard way that incubators or accelerators or whatever the terminology is within large corporations, they don't work. And they don't work for various reasons, but predominantly you can't quite create a startup experience within such a large organization. And so I did learn that the hard way. So I stayed at Microsoft for a year and a half roughly. And while I was there was a company called Tilt that was trying to poach me. And Tilt was a Silicon Valley startup started by a couple of people that I knew from my time at Rackspace when I was intern there as well. I loved my experience at Rackspace. And so I actually got to work with the same manager from Rackspace at Tilt. And that was, one of the big factors of me moving there. But yeah, it was a, very typical Silicon Valley startup. I remember watching Silicon Valley, the show, before I moved, and it was too real. It was, there were a lot of very eerie similarities, just to paint you a picture.
That's supposed to be a joke, but it's not funny to me. Bringing back memories.
I actually had to stop watching it. So I watched the first season, and then when I moved to San Francisco, I had to stop watching it because it was too close to home. Like, it's a little scary how close they got it.
Man.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I landed in the startup world.
So speaking of San Francisco, my understanding from a couple other interviews that you've been on is that your entry to the crypto space came in 2017 while you were in San Francisco at a dinner. Can you kind of break down that full story for our audience?
Yeah. Even after COVID, I think San Francisco is the place to be if you want to be in anything tech, and predominantly because you just keep rubbing your shoulders with other people who are either founders or creators or innovators or builders or makers or any of those things. And so you kind of like, through osmosis, like absorb some of that just by living here and going to like events and dinners and friend groups and whatnot. And so that's exactly what happened to me. So, my boyfriend at the time, now husband, he used to live with Juan Benet. And Juan Benet is the founder of a company called Protocol Labs that is responsible for Filecoin, which is one of the, now pretty big crypto projects. And back then, their biggest project or the biggest outward-facing project was IPFS, which was still actually very much used today. So I went to a dinner at Juan's house. And I think it was someone's birthday, and it was, 30, 40 person dinner. And everyone there was talking about Ethereum. And I remember like Googling the ride back of like, what is Ethereum? And for what it's worth, I didn't actually get it at first. Like back in the 2017 era, like if you Googled, I think even on the Ethereum, Foundation website, like examples of how you can use Ethereum or smart contracts, the examples they had were something like, governance and voting. And I was confused. I was like, why is that such a big deal? Like, why is there such a huge hype about something like decentralized voting? And because I didn't fully understand it, I kind of like wanted to dig deeper into it. And so I started talking to more people about it, like going to meetups. And the very first ETH Global Hackathon was announced shortly afterwards in University of Waterloo, called ETH Waterloo. And I decided to go. And that was basically my entry point into crypto.
And how did that lead to starting Ironfish? What's the story behind Ironfish? And then if you can maybe transition to what is Ironfish as well.
Yeah, so I guess my story actually did start at that hackathon, at that very first hackathon. I went to the hackathon. It was October 2017, I think, and I didn't know much. I only knew that IPFS existed because I was at that dinner and I learned Solidity at the hackathon. So I was like Googling tutorials like while they were doing the intro talks at the hackathon. And so what I built was decentralized video streaming. So How do you take a video and like chunk it up into smaller pieces and put it in IP fast, and so you have like a decentralized video streamer. And then to qualify for some prizes, I put in like a fake maker DAO sort of component to it. So I could qualify for some of the maker prizes,
Nice.
which is great because I actually did get that prize. But a couple things kind of happened at that hackathon. One is I realized how open the crypto community is. And to a large extent, I still stand by that statement. I think the crypto community, at least the right part of the crypto community, is still very welcoming, very open, probably the most welcoming, the most open that I've ever seen. And so, yeah, that hackathon, I'm trying to do my MetaMask integration and it's not working. And so I ask for help, and a mentor comes by and he says, well, I'm not sure what you're doing wrong, but you can ask Dan Finlay for help. He's sitting right behind you. And Dan at the time wrote MetaMask. Like, he was the predominant person who wrote MetaMask.
Nice,
and so
nice.
at 3:30 a.m., the person who wrote MetaMask was helping me debug MetaMask integration for a hackathon. I was just like, wow, like, this is amazing. This is a really, really cool community. So, for my kind of demo presentation for the hackathon, you had to upload your video to like an Amazon server in order for the video to be transcoded, meaning like to be broken up into smaller chunks so that it can be used for a video streaming like editor. And I realized that like that portion, the compute part, was not decentralized. Like, everything else was decentralized, but the compute part was not. And so I kind of went down this like rabbit hole of how do you do decentralized compute? Meaning, if I give a server, if I give you a task of transcoding a video, which is, fairly complex or fairly, I guess, expensive in terms of compute, and you give me a response back, how do I know that the response you gave me is correct without redoing the computation myself? So for instance, if I tell you like transcode this video from one format to another, and you give me an output, how do I very quickly verify that the output is actually correct and you're not just giving me garbage to get paid, right? So I went down that rabbit hole of like, how do you do honest computation? And that's how I got to zero knowledge proofs. So zero knowledge proofs are literally built for this in theory. So zero knowledge proofs are a tool for how to do honest computation. Now, obviously, in terms of their capabilities, we're very, very far from doing something as complex as, video transcoding. But at the heart of it, that it is effectively a tool for honest computation. And that's kind of what led me down the path that eventually became Ironfish. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, and even if you could keep going on that thought of creating Ironfish, what specifically Ironfish is, and just like that just seems like a monumental task. Like, you understand this use case, what like the problem, the why, what you're going to work on, but then like it's a lot to get it from that point to where you're at today. So can you take us through that journey?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, just to keep going on there, I started talking to more people, and in 2017, 2018 era, if you wanted to learn about zero knowledge proofs, it was very hard because there was a Wikipedia page that described Alice and Bob running through a cave, which was very, very high level, very theoretical. And then went from that level all the way down to like very academic journals where they, the first sentence had something like a sextic twist Edwards curve kind of, summary. And you're like, whoa, I'm just trying to understand this. And all of a sudden, you're kind of thrown into like, what is a elliptic curve pairing definition, like right off the bat, and you're like fairly lost. And so at the time, the way I learned about zero knowledge proofs is, again, kind of like in the vein of the hackathon story, is I asked for help. And again, the reason why I'm so bullish on this industry as a whole is because the people in this industry, at least the ones that are here, like to actually build, are incredibly supportive. And so very early on, I got to talk to some of the Zcash founding scientists about how zero knowledge proofs work, or about I got to talk to Alessandro Chiesa, who's one of the founders of Recursive Snarks, who was still a professor at Berkeley. And I got to speak to some of his undergrad students who were working for him at the time. And then I got to talk to some of the Stanford Mafia, like the Dan Bonet plus his students. And so at the time, zero knowledge proofs were pretty much like synonymous with privacy, because the only projects that really utilized them were privacy projects. And so that to me was very interesting. And then when I started looking at crypto as a whole of, like, let's just assume that in 50 years or 5, 10, 50 years, like whatever the horizon is, crypto does become like the fundamental payment system of tomorrow. Like, what are we missing? And it seemed like privacy was by far the biggest thing that people, in my opinion, were kind of ignoring. And at some point, I started going to like hackathons and meetups and conferences all around the world. And I kind of decided to switch to crypto full time. And so a combination of me wanting to be in crypto full time, zero knowledge proofs being this really cool technology, and kind of understanding that privacy is not only important for the space, but it's a huge opportunity that's been overlooked for various reasons by many other teams. And so we started like in late 2018, 2019, and then we rewrote the entire code base in 2020. So the project is roughly 2.5 years, even though the company is roughly 4 years. And our mission has always been, how do we bring privacy to crypto? And now that I've gone through this 4-year journey, I now understand why there are so few privacy projects. And the answer is, it's really hard. It's really hard from a technical, from a technical angle, and it's definitely really hard from a UI angle. Like, how do you make privacy tech actually usable and easy for people to use? And then it's really hard from a regulatory perspective as well. And so happy to talk about any of those things or all of the above. But yeah, it's definitely been kind of a long journey for us to get here.
Well, it's interesting when we talk about privacy, because I think sometimes, particularly maybe by mainstream media and whatnot, when they focus on crypto and like the privacy side of it, it's in a negative connotation, or they talk about the potential dangers. But on the flip side, it's crazy when you think the lack of privacy in crypto with our wallets and stuff, of like, no one today would ever be telling multiple people what they're holding in their wallets or their bank account, or like be able to see all their assets. That's something that very much it's almost taboo to talk about that. You don't talk about what you have, and yet it's so transparent. And so where do you think that needs to kind of go in terms of, you talked about the regulatory challenges and everything like that, but in order to change that narrative when it comes to crypto and privacy?
Yeah, I mean, the way we talk about Artifish is we're building something that is actually more similar, like more analogous to how the non-crypto financial system works today. So exactly like what you said, if you go buy something in a store, the cashier doesn't get to see your entire transaction history and your friend's transactional history and all your holdings and savings and so on. That's just really bizarre. And yet in crypto, that's basically how it works today. You're almost forced to de-anonymize yourself whenever you use it. So for instance, if I say like, hey, you owe me $5 in Ethereum, I have to give you my public address. So just by me asking for funds, I'm actually like de-anonymizing myself. And I remember talking to one person who was not a crypto native person, but I was trying to explain to him like the problem that we're trying to solve. And I think he like purchased like some sort of an NFT that he showed me. And I showed him his wallet. I was trying to walk him through the problem. And he was just amazed. He was like, what? Like, you can see this even in incognito window? Like, it just wasn't like clicking for him. That everything was just so out in the open. Like, he was like a smart person.
Wow.
And so I think when you explain to people, even regulators, right, like, this is the state of crypto today. Like, the transparency comes from a requirement in how validation works. And the reason why Bitcoin was as transparent as it is today is because Bitcoin by itself was a breakthrough. So it's like Bitcoin by itself is extremely amazing. We just didn't have those privacy tools back then, and now we do. And now it's like time to start building things with privacy. But yeah, you're totally right there. Right now, there's privacy has almost become like a dirty word.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's it's associated with like money laundering and illicit activity and people using the dark markets and whatnot. And the reality is, statistically, that's not true. And second of all, privacy is really, really important. And you can build privacy in a way that still allows regulated entities to be compliant. That is how the non-crypto financial world works today. So I think from our perspective, we have like a pretty heavy job ahead of us of education, of like educating people that not all privacy protocols are the same. You can still stay compliant while supporting a privacy protocol, depending on the privacy protocol. And again, it's actually way safer for a crypto user to use privacy preserving technology than to have everything out in the open.
So tell us a little bit more about how Ironfish approaches the problem of privacy in crypto today. It's my understanding that Ironfish is a layer 1 blockchain. I know you've got a token that goes along with it. So how does Ironfish maybe yes, how does it approach that problem and look to solve it? But also, if you could tie that to maybe a comparison of other privacy-based blockchains who have maybe attempted to solve it in maybe different ways, and what those differences are.
Yeah. So before I kind of answer that question, I also want to say that I am very appreciative and grateful and admire anyone who tries to tackle on privacy. So, even when talking about competitors, I feel like once you go through this journey and understand how hard it is, you kind of have this deep admiration for anyone who tries to tackle this problem space. So, I think the fact that we have different privacy protocols is a good thing. Firstly, competition is a good thing because it forces us to be more innovative and forces us to learn from one another and make a better product that the end user actually gets. And the way, there's no quote unquote right answer for how you strike this balance between privacy and compliance. And I think the fact that we have so many different kind of approaches to it is almost like stress testing, what is allowed, which hopefully will get us faster to the answer of, what is the solution here. So for Ironfish today, Ironfish is, like you said, it's a layer 1, so it's a brand new blockchain. All transactions are encrypted, meaning that they are private, and the validation does happen through zero knowledge proofs that are associated with that transaction. And what we did was we added multi-asset support or custom asset support. So Ironfish does not have smart contracts. If you're familiar with Ethereum, for instance, Ethereum has a pretty rich smart contract or programming capability. Ironfish does not have that. We just allow people to create custom assets with very kind of rigid functionalities that they can customize and parameterize. And so that's practically it. And the reason why we did that is because we want Ironfish to be used as a privacy platform. So we want to attract bridge operators or potentially even build bridges ourselves to kind of link Ironfish to other chains, primarily transparent chains like Ethereum or any other ones you might have heard of. So that those chains can use Ironfish as their privacy platform. So the use cases that we're trying to go after is, let's say you have USDC on Ethereum and you want that to live in a fully private environment so you can actually get to a digital cash experience. Our end goal is that you'll be able to transfer that USDC from Ethereum onto Ironfish and have those assets live in a fully private layer. The other thing that we're trying to go after is Bitcoin. We don't have fully private Bitcoin at the moment. And so having wrapped Bitcoin and Ironfish is one approach of how to get there. In terms of how we differ from other layer 1 chains, we view Ironfish as very collaborative. We're actually building privacy for assets that might originate in other chains. And I think most other layer 1s don't do that. And then in terms of the non-layer 1 solutions, so for instance, there are a lot of projects that are building privacy and a smart contracts feature for other blockchains. Ironfish aims to work with many blockchains at the same time, so you can kind of integrate with Ethereum, Solana, Near, and so on in the future, and have all those assets from other chains live on one huge anonymity set.
So to try and understand the user side of this, the user experience side, if I was, let's say I'm using Ethereum, this is where I've got my assets today, and I want to move them to Ironfish so that I can anonymize my transactions. I bridge them over. They're now in Ironfish, and I perform some transactions. Do I have to perform those transactions then with other addresses that are, only within the Ironfish ecosystem? And then do I then, if I want to move back to Ethereum, do I give away my identity if I move it back to my wallet? Is the idea, if you want to stay anonymous but want to leave the chain, I then have to go to, say, a new address? Or, how does a user actually approach this from like that, that if I was going through the motions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, let's say that you're starting from Ethereum. So you would have to work with a bridge operator. And a bridge operator would basically carry that asset onto Ironfish. So let's say you do start with USDC on Ethereum, then you use a bridge and you get to wrapped USDC on Ironfish. When you're on Ironfish, you can transact with any other Ironfish address. Whenever you make any transfer on Ironfish, all of that is completely private, meaning that the transaction does not reveal who the sender, the recipient, the amount, or the asset type is. So all that happens fully privately. And then once you're ready to, let's say, go back onto the Ethereum side, you would then go back to the bridge operator and give them the destination address on Ethereum. So that could be your original destination address for Ethereum, or it could be a different address altogether.
And I guess I'm not, my understanding of how bridges work is only so, and I've never really inspected the transaction information. So I don't know totally if it shows where it's coming from. But let's say I did that, and now I'm going back to Ethereum. When I use the bridge to move my tokens from Ironfish to Ethereum, does that reveal any information in regards to where it came from, or does it just say came from, the bridge contract over to the Ethereum address? I'm curious if the idea is privacy. Is there a way that, by leaving Ironfish, one could be tracked back to sort of like the source?
So your latter explanation was actually more correct. So the bridge operator would simply say, you have I have permission to give these assets over to this address that was specified by the user. But yeah, in terms of whenever you're interacting with a transparent layer, you are leaking some privacy. So for instance, one way to do that is denominations. So let's say you put in 1.337 ETH or DAI or USDC onto Ironfish, and yes, you have the complete privacy on the Ironfish side. But let's say exactly an hour later, or some very short amount of time later, you go back onto the Ethereum side and you withdraw exactly 1.337, ETH out or whatever. Then, you can start making some assumptions about what actually happened.
Right.
So you still have to be, somewhat cognizant of how your actions are revealing your information. When you're at the Ironfish side, none of that actually is revealed.
So Elena, my understanding is that the Mainnet launched on April 20th. So how did that launch go? Were there any nerves launching that question marks of whether it would all go completely successfully? Did it go completely successfully? Can you walk us through that process?
Yeah. So before we launched Mainnet, we launched quite a few test nets. So we already had a lot of practice of actually launching a brand new chain. So we ran different test nets all the way from December of 2021. So it was a very long running test net. And yeah, every time we launched a new test net, we had a different goal in mind for how to stress test Ironfish differently. But we were already kind of building a muscle for how to do the actual launch. And we did have launches that were less successful. So for instance, our last testnet even, Ironfish again is a proof of work chain. And so when you kind of launch your blockchain, you kind of have to guess what will the hash power of the network be when you launch it. Because if you set the target for your first block to be, or a difficulty for your first block to be, too high, then it might take a very long time for someone to find a subsequent block. And likewise, if you set it too low, then you might have people finding way too many blocks at the same time, causing a lot of forking issues. So you kind of have to, really guess correctly of what the initial difficulty for your first block should be. For our third testnet, we actually set the difficulty way too high, and we had to literally relaunch it because it was very anticlimactic. We launched this thing, we did a whole Discord live stage, getting people pumped for a new testnet, and it was like half an hour of like nothing happening. And so we had to like actually relaunch it with a much lower difficulty, to kind of get it going. And so for launch, we've spoken to a lot of our professional miners, just going to get a sense of like what is going to be the hashing activity on Mainnet. And we put it at like, I don't remember, like between 100 and 200 times more than what we've seen in our previous test nets. And we basically guessed it like extremely well. The first block was found in like 90 seconds, which is perfect. Our block times are 60 seconds. And so if you look at our like, average block time, it went like from 90 to 60 extremely fast. Even though the hash power was rising. So when we launched, our hash power was like 200 times what we've seen at our busiest testnet previously, and actually climbed to something like 500 times, and then stabilized to that initial number. So I think the launch itself was actually extremely smooth, given the kind of the ambiguity of who is going to be mining. We had some miners mine who have approached us ahead of time, and so we kind of knew that they were going to be mining. And then we had some miners who kind of like came out of the woodwork, like we didn't know about their existence, and they just started mining, and they were, adding to a lot of hash power. So I think the launch actually went extremely smoothly, which I'm super grateful for.
What is the reason that it's proof of work?
Yeah, that is a great question. So we thought about this a lot, obviously, because we started building Ironfish at this era where all new layer ones were proof of stake or variation of proof of stake or different types of proof of stake projects. And so for us to be proof of work was extremely atypical. and definitely very strange. And I think it still actually was a really great decision for us. So our whole thesis for Ironfish is, how do we make this project decentralized? That is definitely the hill that I will die on. I think decentralization really, really matters, especially for something like a privacy platform that is already kind of fairly controversial. And so for us, like decentralization was definitely key. So there's a lot of like different ways for how you categorize, or how do you measure decentralization. And so for us, it was one metric that we look at is number of full nodes and number of miners, meaning how many individuals can get kind of onboarded onto Ironfish and actually start supporting the network. And how do we lower the friction for new people entering the system so that more people do it? And so for proof of stake coins, you typically have validators and full nodes. And if you look at some of the newer proof of stake projects that are coming out, typically those numbers are fairly small because you have to really kind of encourage people to run these nodes. And so if you look at some of the projects, they might have low hundreds of full nodes or full validators. And so for us, it was, very much the goal of how do we make it so that any person with a laptop or a computer or or any piece of hardware could potentially run a full node fairly quickly. And, again, kind of like reducing the friction. So to kind of give you some stats, for phase 2, which was our second incentivized testnet, we asked people to turn on their telemetry, meaning that they were going to give us some stats about their full nodes in order to get points on the leaderboard. And we had roughly 11,000 nodes on testnet phase 2. Testnet phase 3, I think we had a bot problem, but we reported 60,000 nodes, which, again, I think there were some bot farms that were running that. Right now that we're mainnet launched, telemetry is optional, meaning that people have to run a separate command to give us those metrics. And we're reporting, roughly between 800 to 1,000 nodes like today, which I think is actually a very, very healthy number, considering that, this is not incentivized in terms of them even providing that telemetry. So I think that's actually a really good number. So proof of work basically let us lower the barrier of entry quite dramatically, because again, anyone can just run a full node. And I think in this new era where most projects are proof of stake, miners are very, very intrigued at looking at new proof of work projects. And so that was actually a pretty big plus for us, because we were now kind of starting to develop this ecosystem and this part of our community that are, either professional miners or hobby miners or just solo miners or people who are, joining mining pools. And so we're kind of like carving out this really unique space in our community for people who are looking for new projects that are in the proof of work space that don't have many other alternatives right now.
And what are all the roles that the Iron coin plays in the ecosystem or on the platform? And what did you learn going through the launch of that coin?
So what do you mean by that?
Well, obviously it plays a role in the mining process, but like as far as value goes, or does it add to like, you talked about the importance of decentralization does the token play a role in that at all? Or, what are the aspects of the tokenomics of Iron?
Yeah. So all transaction fees are paid in Iron and all block rewards are paid in Iron. So this is very analogous to, for instance, Ethereum. So I also think of Ethereum as a platform. Ethereum is a platform for smart contracts, and all transaction fees are paid in Ethereum. So for us, it's kind of fairly analogous. So we want to be a privacy platform that provides privacy for any other crypto asset. Again, ones that even might be originating from other chains, and the transaction fees denominated in Iron. Nothing comes for free. So like a lot of times regulators would ask, or they would say like, I like the blockchain part, I just don't like the cryptocurrency part of a blockchain. And so it's really important to set your incentives properly. And that's why the native coin is also part of the block reward. So that's basically the tokenomics of it.
And then when it comes to just kind of like the future and how you see cryptocurrencies evolving and privacy and everything like that, like what do you see kind of in the future, like 5 years down the road? How will it be different than the way people interact with crypto today?
Well, I'm definitely very bullish on privacy. So my answer is
we'll take that into consideration.
No, but I mean, this might sound corny, but if you think to the beginning of the internet, like we did not have encryption when the internet first started. All traffic was plain text, unencrypted, and fairly unsecure. The original quote unquote crypto wars were crypto wars of the 90s when, people were trying to push encryption. So I don't even remember like the Netscape browser back in the day. They came out with SSL technology or TLS technology, which is now like HTTPS effectively. And back in the day, that encryption was fairly controversial because we just came out of the Cold War, right? We kind of learned that strong encryption is a huge advantage in war, firstly, but it's effectively like a weapon, even though it's just knowledge of how to encrypt messages across the internet. And so, kind of fast forward to today, not only is encryption kind of like opened up the entire like e-commerce industry because it allows secure communication. People now could purchase things online without having their credit card information stolen. But now you would be hard pressed to find a website that doesn't use HTTPS, right? And so now you and I are actually using HTTPS right now, but we don't have to do anything extra for it. Like we don't have to understand how Diffie-Hellman works, right? Even though we actually are using Diffie-Hellman in order to like create that initial handshake to have a shared secret key so that both of our messages are encrypted with something the other person can decrypt. We don't have to understand any of the intricacies of how the cryptography works, and we don't have to do anything extra because the technology has kind of caught up with convenience. And so, in 5, 10, whatever the horizon is, I do view that either all or majority of crypto transactions are going to have a privacy aspect to it. And it's going to be so seamless that people are not even going to think about it. It's going to be like the plumbing of crypto, just like how you and I don't think about the fact that we currently use HTTPS. We don't even have to understand how the technology works. We just use it. I do really think that the future of crypto has to have some sort of a privacy component to it. And it has to also be as seamless and convenient for people to use as, the video streaming that we're using right now.
And on that exact note, it brings the question around to Ironfish and like your mission with Ironfish. Is Ironfish trying to solve that problem or to to get to a place down the road where it is that plumbing you speak of that provides the infrastructure or the technology within other blockchains to allow for privacy on or off at the user's whim easily? Or is Ironfish sort of its own thing where it's its own blockchain that will develop privacy technology, but maybe then lend out your learnings to the rest of the blockchain industry? Or how does that all work? And does that question make sense?
Yeah, no. So we're definitely aiming for the former part of that, which is we want to be the plumbing for crypto. And that's a super ambitious goal, and we're definitely not there yet. And so launching a privacy layer 1 is just like, step 0 in that goal. Like we need to have something so we can build on top of it to get there. So that is exactly what happened every April 20th is we launched that kind of fundamental privacy platform where, we have a lot of ways to go in terms of scalability, but at least we solved that first problem of like privacy. And now how do we build bridges and like figure out scalability solutions and programmability and like all these other challenges might come later. But yeah, that is definitely the first step in kind of that vision of being the plumbing for crypto.
And in regards to what you've mentioned about like regulation, you mentioned regulation throughout, but we haven't really talked about it yet. And I'm curious, like, how do you approach privacy on a blockchain while taking into consideration regulation, which right now is still only semi-existent, but clearly is controversial when considering, privacy because of nefarious activities and bad actors and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, so regulation is definitely a tricky one. And it's kind of tricky for several reasons. There's kind of like the direct kind of ambiguities of what is regulation for crypto today, but also for privacy technology today, or for privacy plus crypto technology today. And then there's like the second order effects, which is what I'm seeing, or like what Ironfish is seeing currently, is that the fear of regulation is also pretty effective. So for instance, even though we may not have concrete rules or concrete guidelines in terms of like what is regulation for privacy projects are, a lot of regulated entities don't even want to find out, right? So they would rather not even take the risk of supporting a privacy project, not because there's active regulation against privacy, but because, they're too afraid of the possibility that by supporting a privacy project, they could get in trouble now or in the future. And so that has been like fairly hard to navigate of like, of kind of like making this argument that a regulated entity today can certainly support a privacy project, especially one like Ironfish with a full view key, which I'll get to in a second, and still be compliant. And so, every argument that I kind of like make in that regard makes sense to even existing regulators or former regulators. However, because of its ambiguity, a lot of regulated entities don't even want to kind of interact and take the risk. And so that has been like super challenging to work with. But in terms of like the regulation side, I mean, like we learned a lot from Tornado Cash, and I think we're still learning a lot from Tornado Cash. And if your listeners kind of don't know the full story, I'm happy to walk them through it.
Yeah, please do.
We'd love to
Okay,
hear
cool.
that.
So Tornado Cash was a smart contract on Ethereum that provided a privacy layer for Ethereum assets. So you can kind of think of it as like this dark pool, which is a smart contract where people could deposit funds into Tornado Cash and then withdraw those same funds to a different wallet on Ethereum, and therefore breaking the link between the depositor and the recipient. Did it provide the best privacy? No. You could argue that Aztec, which was also launched at the time, actually provided better privacy. But it had a fairly high volume and high TVL, so total value locked, for privacy projects. So I think it consistently had over $1 billion funds just kind of sitting on the smart contract because people prefer to kind of park their money in a privacy layer. And so even though it might have not provided the best privacy, it was extremely easy to use. So it's kind of another example of if you make your product convenient for people to use, and people are more likely to use it. So if you were to go on their website, their online wallet was extremely easy, like very clear, very concise. I had like a deposit button, a withdraw button, very, very intuitive to use. And a lot of people used it. unfortunately, North Korea hackers also unfortunately used Tornado Cash. So I don't know if you remember, but there were a couple bridge hacks that happened, like the Ronin Bridge, Nomad Bridge, and a few others. And the North Korean hackers, namely a group called the Lazarus Group, used the funds that they got from those bridge hacks and laundered that money through Tornado Cash. And it's unclear what that amount is. I've seen estimates of 600 million to like over $1 billion of money laundered through Tornado Cash in that regard. And the U.S. Treasury, especially OFAC, so OFAC is a body within the U.S. Treasury that deals with sanctions, looked at all this activity and sanctioned Tornado Cash, the Ethereum, like all the Ethereum addresses associated with Tornado Cash. And so what happened was when that initial statement came out, the initial statement was very much like, Tornado Cash is sanctioned. And people had a question mark of, well, what does that mean? Because Tornado Cash is code, like it's a smart contract. Like you can't just sanction code. And so GitHub, for instance, deplatformed Tornado Cash almost instantly because, for them, it's like way too risky to figure out, like, are they sanctioning code or the smart contract or the company? Like, we don't know. And so it kind of created this huge kind of backlash in the community of, was code just sanctioned? Was a smart contract sanctioned? Typically sanctions refer to persons, but this is like a smart contract. It's very confusing. And then, funds were frozen even from normal users who were definitely not terrorists. And so like there were a lot of kind of like outrage there as well.
I remember just sorry to cut in because I remember one of the funny stories that came out of that was people basically trying to make a point by using Tornado Cash to send money to like prominent figures' wallets to then be like, oh, look, like Jimmy Kimmel's used Tornado Cash. Is he going to jail now kind of thing? So that was one of the stories I remember coming out of that whole fiasco. But please continue.
No, that was exactly it. And so the U.S. Treasury did kind of correct themselves very quickly that code is not sanctioned. Code is still free speech. Like that is not sanctioned. So GitHub actually did kind of bring them back on. But Tornado Cash is still sanctioned. and so people have this like really, still like there's actually 2 lawsuits right now that are happening against OFAC, basically against the US Treasury Department, because of this kind of like this question mark of like, wait a minute, were those sanctions actually legal? Because again, they kind of like sanctioned this decentralized piece of code, which is very bizarre, like when you think about it. But in terms of like how privacy projects took that to heart is all of a sudden, all the privacy projects started having this conversation about like, how do we build privacy for the normal user, but also catch bad actors or prevent bad actors from using the platform in the first place. And that is extremely hard. And so I think different projects approach this very differently. So some projects, for instance, try to mitigate this with public statements of like, if you're ever caught, that we're going to freeze your funds. Like if you're a bad actor and you try to use our privacy protocol, then you're going to be kind of frozen forever. And that's fine. But again, it's really hard to catch bad activity when you're also trying to provide privacy. The way we did it at Ironfish is we basically beefed up our view key. So on Ethereum, for instance, you have your private key that lets you spend money, and you have your public key that you can request money to. For Ironfish, we have a private key, a public key, and then we also have a view key. And a view key gives you full transactional history. So for instance, you can kind of think of it as like right now, you can go to Etherscan for Ethereum and see all the transactional history for that particular wallet. On Ironfish, you can't do that because everything is encrypted. However, if you have a view key for a particular wallet, you can see all the transactional details for that particular wallet. So, for instance, you can't. So, if I sent money to you and I gave someone else my view key, they would be able to see the fact that I sent money to you, but they would not be able to see any more information about your wallet because they don't have your view key. And so we kind of approach this in a different way by kind of beefing up this view key and kind of making the statement that this is exactly how banks work today. So, for instance, if you are a suspicious actor and a bank gets a subpoena or a warrant to kind of reveal your bank statements, they would be able to provide information for that particular user and not the entire kind of like ecosystem of everyone that user has ever kind of interacted with. And so we're kind of, again, saying like, let's not reinvent the wheel. We already have really good like procedures in place in the non-crypto world for how to catch bad actors with this level of visibility. Let's just kind of mirror those tactics in the crypto world. And that's exactly how Yuki's for Ironfish work.
Do you get any pushback from people who are really, really like privacy at all costs kind of thing, that like, no, there shouldn't be a view key because, what if the government or the entity that wanted to see it is like, maybe they had an issue with that or something? Like, is that a tricky one to handle, or have you gotten any pushback from that side?
We haven't gotten a ton of pushback from that. Where we did get that similar pushback is from people who are in like the Monero community. Mm-hmm. For us, I think most people understand at this point that whichever privacy solution will quote unquote win the space or get mass adoption or get like actual mass like usage, they're going to have to figure out how to strike this balance between privacy and compliance. And I think we actually like reached a really, really good balance. Yes, every account has a view key, but you who created the wallet, you have full autonomy of who you give this view key to. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if you're using a regulated exchange, you kind of understand that you have no privacy while you're using this exchange. But if you move your funds to a fresh and new wallet that the exchange has no kind of visibility into, now you're back into like this, full autonomy over your own funds, which I think is a pretty good balance because, it's not people that get regulated; it's like regulated entities that get regulated. And so, for our job is how do we bolster the tools that make their job easier, while still kind of providing the privacy for the regular crypto user of today.
So Elena, we're getting close to the end of this conversation, and we're going to ask you the same 3 questions we ask every guest of Show Me the Crypto. But before we get to that set of 3 questions, I have one other question. And I came across a video of yourself from, I think it was 5 years ago. And you were doing a presentation on how to build your own crypto kitty. And so my question is, what are your thoughts on how the NFT popularity, like going from you giving that presentation 5 years ago to then seeing kind of the 2021 to really now, like present time boom of NFTs. What are your overall thoughts on kind of the moment that NFTs had?
Yeah. So the way I got into crypto is by giving those talks on how to write your own ERC 721 smart contract. And my whole spiel was, if I can live code an ERC 721 smart contract on stage in under 30 minutes with like a really basic front end, then so can you, and with tests. And so I wanted people to understand, like, back in the day, there was like the ERC 20 craze was happening. And I thought ERC 721s were way more interesting because they could represent not just collectibles, but other things like house deeds or messages. And I think it was much easier for people to conceptualize what a non-fungible token is. And so I had a lot of fun doing that. That's kind of how I decided to go into crypto full time, of like, wow, like it's such a green space. I can do so much here. And so, yeah, I think I was definitely early.
Yeah, no kidding.
And exploring and like really trying to push NFTs as a concept. And I think like for privacy, it's actually kind of the same thing. Like I'm kind of, I think, when we started working on privacy, it was definitely way too early to start working on privacy, which is definitely the best time to start working on something that's way too early. You just need to figure out how to like convince VCs to give you money for something that is slightly too early for it to be a hype. But yeah, I mean, again, I'm super bullish on Ironfish. I'm very bullish on privacy in general, because I do think that the next big push is going to be, how do we add privacy to different parts of crypto in different parts of ways. So yeah, good question about the NFTs, because yeah, I think I was definitely three years early.
Yeah, way ahead of the curve
on NFTs, and yeah, I think we're slightly early in privacy, which again is the best time to actually launch and start.
Totally. Well, this has been, like I said, an awesome conversation. You've done a great job kind of explaining everything regarding Ironfish and just the greater conversation of privacy as well. But you're not off the hook yet. We have a 3-question segment called You Had Me at Crypto. We ask these questions to every single guest. Alpha's going to ask you those.
Okay, Elena, you ready?
Okay.
All right. The first question, who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Oh, this is so hard. I should have prepared. Oh gosh. Let me just think. So I'm assuming you're asking on Twitter, right?
Doesn't matter in general.
But yeah, probably
Twitter's probably the most
Twitter,
popular.
okay.
Like, yeah.
So I guess the first thing that came to mind is this account called 0x Foobar. And I remember discovering that account because when the Tornado Cash sanctions was happening, you know, I'm assuming it's a dude, but I'm not sure. They made a really great post about the privacy landscape and just like really analyze the pros and cons of like a layer 1 solution versus a smart contract solution versus a layer 2 solution. And I remember thinking like, wow, this person's like extremely knowledgeable. And so obviously I tried to hire them. And I got turned down, which is fine. You know, we should definitely try than not try. But yeah, I still follow that account, and I just think like they have like really great insights and like that account, like they really kind of dive deep into a certain topic before they really like go at it. And then I think Autism Capital. I know it's probably an answer you get a lot, but
no, I don't think we've ever gotten that one.
We have,
shockingly. Yeah. So good answers.
Awesome. All right. Second question. What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
Oh no.
We're going 10 years out.
It's so far out. It's not financial advice. Yeah. It's throwing a
Definitely
prediction at a dartboard.
I'm just thinking like, you know, Balaji just made the bet that it's going to be $1 million, like, you know,
90 days.
And he was saying 90 days. You got 10 years to get this one. So,
oh gosh, you know, I don't know because, and I think it depends, right? Like we went from 60K to like back to like 10K and now we're at 20K. So it's not even what year, but what months within that year.
Yeah,
100%. That's
actually a huge difference in terms of multiples. I mean, I don't know. I think if I were hard pressed. Well, okay. So with inflation or not adjusted for inflation? Okay, not adjusted for inflation because I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know, 50K. I remember like there was a Naval tweet where it's like, it's not that Bitcoin price is rising, it's that the purchasing power of USD is falling. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah,
right.
We've had a couple answers that it's interesting watching people like the wheels turning as they answer this question, because there have been people who take that into effect. Because really the question we're just asking is in US dollars, 10 years from today's date, early May 2033, how many US dollars will a Bitcoin be?
Right. And yeah, I mean, the question is like, what's going to happen to the US dollar in 10 years? Oof. You know,
there's lots of layers to that question. So you're going with 50K though.
50K, not adjusted for inflation. So whatever, you know. Yeah.
Okay.
Which
we'll do the math when we get there.
Maybe a bullish, but yeah. I mean, which is kind of like basically saying it's fairly stable, considering that it's, you know, not at peak today. Okay, maybe we should see something higher. I don't want like, how about 500K? I just don't want the Bitcoin maxis to go after me.
500K? Perfect.
Okay, there. We just 10x'd your bet. I like it. All right. Third question. What is the most underrated project in crypto? And no, you cannot choose Ironfish.
Oh, I wasn't thinking about it, but yeah, Ironfish is a great answer.
Yeah, not saying it's not underrated, but.
Yeah. I mean, again, like I think I'm pretty bullish on privacy projects right now. Like, you know, Aztec, again, just have a lot of admiration for that project and what they're doing. Again, privacy is extremely hard, so like very impressed with anyone trying to tackle this. But I think they're doing like really interesting things. Let's see, like I should give another one. I think CryptoPunks are still like, I think now they're underrated.
Yeah. Do you have, not to I know we're talking about privacy and I don't want to expose your NFT holdings, but the fact that you were in NFTs so early, I won't just say CryptoPunks, but like generally, do you have some OG NFTs in your collection?
Yeah, I just have one single CryptoPunk, which I do use as my profile picture, but it's attached to a wallet that I don't normally use. So I think we're okay there. But yeah, so my now husband basically was really got into NFTs even back in like 2017, 2018. And he basically made me purchase a CryptoPunk, right? He was like, this is a really cool project. Just like buy one. And actually he was really trying to push me to buy two. And I was like, I'm not going to spend $300 on a digital picture. That's absurd.
Oh, man.
No, you're like, I wish I bought two.
So I did buy that one CryptoPunk for $300. And I thought that was like absurd.
Oh, I love that story. The craziest we've heard so far is one of our guests. What is his name? It's Alex, right? From Nansen.
I think that was him. Yeah.
Anyways, Alex from Nansen minted 20 Bored Apes and sold them all under 1 ETH. Oh. I love stories like that.
Yeah, I mean, I have the opposite story too. Like, I still have quite a few loot.
Oh yeah.
And I remember like when loot like went up to like floor of 11 ETH, and I was like, should I sell or should I hold? And so I decided to hold. So there's definitely, other stories going the opposite way too.
100%. Yeah. Well, Elena, like I said before, such a good job explaining everything privacy. It was an honor having you on the show. We're excited to follow along and see where Ironfish goes. But thank you for joining Alf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.